Okay.
All right, welcome to undergraduate research. It's Undergraduate Research Council's Brown Bag. We're grateful for everybody to be here. We've got people here face to face. We've got people online. What we're going to do is we're going to have a presentation for about 20, 30 minutes, however long, and then a question and answer period. And so if you're online, we'll ask you to hold your questions or put them in the text box, and we'll get to them afterwards. Otherwise, people here will answer questions. We are just really honored to have Dr. Annie Price here from sociology speaking on using statistical analysis and cross-national data to understand what shapes our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. And I've been looking forward to this since you said you were going to do it. I'm going to hand you the mouse.
Okay. So I have a very sort of formal presentation planned for our very little informal conversation group here today. But that's okay because I've been asked before by people in other departments, they say, are you in sociology always this formal? And I say, yes, we have a very formal department head and we are always very formal. So it's right in line with how we normally act. So I'm going to be talking about using statistics and cross-national data to understand our beliefs and behaviors. And I was worried this topic might seem a little bit too dry. Maybe it was a little dry considering the attendance. So, but I think when we think about that title already, we have some interesting juxtaposition of terms, which I think makes it a little bit intriguing. So already, statistics and data both seem very objective, very definitive. And then we have our beliefs and behaviors, which seem very incalculable, sort of indistinct, what I call squishy, right? Like squishy things. And so today we'll talk about how sociologists try to, join these concepts together. So we'll start with what exactly sociology is and what sociologists actually study. So I think college students here at VSU, and then also just community members outside the university, they're not always sure what sociology is and what sociologists do for various reasons, right? For one thing, sociology is a relatively new discipline compared to the other social sciences, and then in our college compared to the humanities. And though much of the classical theory of sociology comes from writings of scholars in the 18th century, they were writing about human society as a whole. And those theorists are usually also the same theorists that are the basis for other social sciences that have been established as disciplines longer, like economics, political science, and cultural anthropology. And so I hate to tell you this, but also sociology is not a required course in VSU's core curriculum. So what that means is if you're very unlucky, you could go through your whole college career at VSU and never take a sociology class. And so related to that fact that it's not part of the, like a required class in the core curriculum, unlike, say history or English, right, or math, they're very prominent there. It also means that students aren't getting it as much in dual enrollment in high school, and it's just not as much of a part of high school curriculum, right? So all of those are reasons why I think people wonder, what is exactly sociology? And I'm sure, AJ could say the same, that when we tell our family and friends, they're sometimes like, oh, interesting. And then they're like, next topic, or, So I have this list of just some interesting books here by sociologists, just took a pile off my office shelf. But you can see sort of some of the things. The first one, Cohabitation Nation. How, let's see, gender, class, and the remaking of relationships. So studying how we usually, would often talk about people, are they married or are they single? And we see that in a lot of surveys, but cohabiting, or what people would call shacking up, right, is a whole new category that's really prevalent now, and it's really changed the life course trajectory because people are often, maybe graduating high school, then they might be with someone and they're cohabiting for a while, then they might have a child, then they might go to college, and then they might get married, maybe in that order. So we don't, just like we don't have this traditional college student anymore, we don't have a traditional pathway for what we call emerging adults anymore either. So young adults also don't have the same pathway. It's sort of dangerous to put the books here because I'll spend a lot of time going through each one. So I'm just going to talk
They
about.
all look very interesting.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk about one other I love. So that's the outsourced self, and it's called What Happens When We Pay Others to Live Our Lives for Us. And if you want like an interesting read, that one's maybe about 2014, so it's a few years old now, and it's everything. So are you using HelloFresh instead of, cooking your own meals, or are you going out to eat instead of cooking your own meals? Who's taking care of your kids while you're at work? Maybe who's mowing your lawn? What else? It even gets into like the dating, like, those services that, they curate your dating list for you, right? So that you're not needing to take chances with these people that may not be the ideal, right? So it's sort of, it makes you rethink everything, and you sort of look at it and say, it's based on in-depth interviews, and then just a lot of different examples of it's split up into these different realms, like parenting, elder care. It starts with the way the author begins the book is she's looking for a way to care for her elderly mother who can no longer live on her own. And she says, I'm not going to give up my job and move out there. And she can't move in with me. I don't live in a space where I can, have her move in. And so what are the marketplace options? So again, lots of interesting books that represent what sociologists study. So I say much of sociological theory focuses on social change and social cohesion. So first, with the social cohesion, sociologists focus on how do we maintain our unity. So why do we not fall apart into separate warring factions, whether we're talking about our smallest institutions, like the family, right? So how do we make these divisions of who picks up the kids and who cooks the dinner and who goes to work for the full day and who goes to work for part of the day? You can tell I'm thinking about my own experience.
Yeah.
Right, so all of that, how do we make this work within the family so that we hang together and we don't split apart? And then AJ, you would probably think of it in terms of the church too, right? Particular church institutions. How do we hang together and when do we split apart, right? Yeah, exactly. And then that can also be our largest institutions, like intergovernmental organizations like the UN, right? Again, how do we maintain our cohesion as a world society and not just, each their own, all the way from the individual up to the intergovernmental level. And then the other thing they focus on, the other aspect of that would be social change. So first of all, how do we maintain cohesion? How do we, second, if we're saying, okay, we work together like a system, we teach our students in, our intro classes, we're like a body. The federal government is like the nervous system or the brain. Then we have the circulatory system, and that transports the goods. And we have whatever else, maybe the digestive system, think of like our food system, our agricultural system. So we say, so once we've explained social cohesion, it's sort of like, well, then how can we explain social change? How does change occur in our society? So sociologists study for that too. For example, how those involved in the civil rights movement, the LGBTQ movement, or persons with autism are able to successfully organize for greater rights in society. So two different sort of separate theoretical frameworks there. And then finally, a key aspect of sociology focuses on the relationships and the power struggles between and within different institutions. And by social institutions, I mean educational institutions and schools, our families, our religious institutions, our workplaces. So for example, a question like, how do our governmental policies affect our families, right? So with my students, it's always in the introductory classes, we take these things for granted, that you start having governmental provided schooling, which is also governmental provided childcare at, age 4 or 5, right? So why does this not start at birth, and how would it look different for families if it did, right? So the different interrelationships between our different social institutions. So how do sociologists study the social world? So we use the scientific method to investigate social questions. And then just two things I really wanted to highlight here is the difference between qualitative and quantitative data. And probably everyone in here can sort of say within their own disciplines what the divides are, right? So it may not be, I mean, I'm trying to think, I don't know, maybe within political science, it's like the people who focus on American politics versus international comparative. I don't know if that's the divide. But we know within different disciplines, there's usually people who say, this is the way things should be done. This is the way real historians do it, right? And so within sociology, we have a bit of a divide between people who rely on qualitative methods and people who rely on quantitative methods. So of course, we see people use both within the same paper or study. But with qualitative, we'd have forms like ethnography, in-depth interviews, focus groups, observing people, like participant observation, maybe acting as a participant and observing everything from, like gang behavior and criminal behavior to the workings of religious institutions, and then content analysis, right, textual analysis, and then quantitative, numerical or measurable data. And one of the advantages of this is that we can make inferences about a larger population from a smaller representative sample. So that's a big part of what sociologists do, is take a smaller sample that's representative of a larger population and then say, using these statistical inferences, I can be pretty sure that what I'm finding to be true for this population should hold true for, the larger society or a larger group as a whole. Then, of course, the question of why conduct cross-national research, like what does it add when we look across societies or countries as opposed to, just questions within them. And probably a lot of you in here do some degree of this. I think probably everyone in here has done cross-national probably research or to some degree. So again, some of these are more student-centered, right? For our students, allows us to look at how trends or social phenomenon operate in different cultural, political, or economic settings, and it lets us understand the effect of both history and social context. So how are something like attitudes towards science or attitudes towards women working different in societies with a communist history, right? Post-communist societies versus ones that never had that experience, or how does a colonial history, societies that, what about even ones that we could code as recent colonial history, maybe didn't get independence until the 1960s or something. How would that affect something like, women's rights or trust in national government or any of those sort of phenomenon that we might be interested in? And so in a lot of my research, I use the World Values Survey, and we use this because rather than needing to collect our own data in each society, which obviously has a lot of benefits, you make that questionnaire yourself, right? You ask exactly the questions you want to ask, but that's very time consuming, very expensive. So instead, we can rely on publicly available free cross-national data collected by experts in their own societies and then organized into one data set. The World Values Survey was developed in 1980 by a political scientist, Ronald Inglehart, at the University of Michigan. And originally it was the European Values Survey. And then over time, it expanded to 120 countries or societies. So, countries and then like Puerto Rico or something, like societies too. What else to say about that? Not all the countries are included in each wave of data, and then not all the questions are included for each country. So you sort of have to look through and see what's available for the questions that you're interested in. It's conducted every 5 years, and it's the largest non-commercial survey of values, people's values, attitudes, behaviors. That's what they say their goal was of this kind. So I want to look, we'll see if this works, and do a little bit of World Values Survey online analysis. So I think maybe it'll just be easier to just, will this work?
It should.
Okay, to just pull it up in a separate, well, let me try my link actually so I don't have to go to your keyboard. Let's just see. And then I can just go back to my PowerPoint. So if we go to the World Values Survey, you can see that you can download the data. That's what I do when I'm doing, analysis for a paper. and I want to be able to do some more sophisticated analysis, and then maybe add some data to it that is not available in the World Value Survey. But if we want to just look quickly at it, we can do online analysis. And if we go here, we can say, I think this one is completed. I'm trying to think if this one is complete enough that we can use it. I think it is. So we can go in here, and then we can look at the countries that we'd like to compare. So when we're doing cross-national research, ideally we have some reason we're comparing these countries, right? Rather than just, I picked the first off the list. Though I will say that on a lot of my research, I'll say, I used every country for which there was data for which this question was available. Because often, once you get into the questions you want to use and the countries that are available, your sample gets a lot smaller. So I'll say I'm going to look at every single one. Here we can look at.
Sorry to interrupt, but we can't see the online. Participants can't see the screen.
Thank you. Do you know how to share my screen, AJ?
Oh, on collaborative?
Yeah.
Well, I guess go back to the collaborative
Yep.
link. And
And
one of
then-
those buttons up there, maybe
Let's
that.
see, is it this one? Download, clear. Let's
I think
see.
the, next to the little people icon on the right with the 4, the one next to it,
Yeah, it's the share
the arrow to go down in that column,
all the way down the bottom.
there's the tool icon, and then there's the people icon, the one in between.
Oh, yeah.
This,
Share
Yeah.
content.
thank you, perfect. Okay, so let's see if this will,
And
can
then
you,
different options, so you're gonna wanna share,
share application
Yeah.
screen?
I believe so.
I think that would be it.
Okay, let's see if this works.
Oh, yeah, and then choose the one you get to choose.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, let's see, so we go,
Oh, you have to hit share though.
okay, thank you. So back
Just
here,
giving you options,
okay,
so do entire
And then-
screen and then share, and then that should capture whenever you change.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Cordell, can you, Cordell can no longer be the one to tell us. Hopefully people can see this. Let's see if we can go back, to what,
Then they should be able to see this screen right now.
okay, maybe someone will tell us if they can, but you guys can see it, so that's the advantage of being here. So we're gonna go with, the 10, highest income countries available, in this wave of the data. So we've got China and the US and, Germany. Let's see if I can do alphabetical order.
Why are there
France.
2 Germanys?
Oh, yeah, there are 2 Germans.
Good question, and I don't know that. I wouldn't, maybe it could be from previous waves when you could look at East and West Germany.
Oh, maybe.
So maybe even though you couldn't get that in this wave, maybe it still exists because if I looked at a different wave or earlier wave
They have
data, I
like a
could get at that. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, but I'm
Should
good
you click
question.
both of
There you
them?
go, click both.
We'll click both of them, see what happens. Germany, let's see, France, UK, where's my UK? There it is. And, Canada,
I think you're right about that, because I'm seeing multiple Russian Federation, multiple Serbia,
okay.
multiple.
I think, you know,
Fascinating,
when I-
just seeing the list.
yeah, when I looked at it the other day, I didn't even, pay attention to that or notice that, so, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what we get. Okay, so then Japan, Mexico, Sweden, let's see, Mexico, and Sweden. I think I've got them, anyway, we've got about a nice selection of some high income countries. And then we've already selected our waves, we're on the most recent wave of data. Then we can go to the survey questions. And, so this is where you can spend, hours and hours here. It's a really fun thing to just go in here and look at this. There was a few years ago, maybe it was in, like, on NPR, Shelley's nodding, maybe you saw this. They had an interactive like this where it was sort of like an article. I mean, it was NPR Online, if that's the source it was. I think it was NPR. And it said, like, what child characteristics are valued in different societies, because that's a big section they have, is rank these characteristics for children in terms of most important to least important. And so we'll probably see these when we're looking. So here it is. We're not going to look at them today, but So important in life, we're gonna look at one of those, but important child qualities, good manners, independence, hard work, feeling of responsibility, tolerance, thrift saving, money and things. So it's really interesting to look across the societies, and a lot of it sort of makes sense. You can see societies where thrift saving would be really important, right? And then creativity is somewhere on there, and you can, it's really interesting to sort of see the obedience versus the more authoritarian versus, more imagination kind of thing. I said that we would look at importance in life, leisure time. And the reason I picked this one was sort of, I thought, you know, for our students that are all here, we'd look at something that was a little bit like, you know, all the viral TikToks now and like quiet quitting, and that's a big issue for, you know, Generation Z and people who are newly in the workplace. Plus, I find that really fascinating because, you know, like, it's interesting, like in AJ and my department, we have a wide range of different ages representing different generations. And, you know, those could be one factor that shapes people's attitudes and beliefs about the way the workplace works. And then there's probably a number of other factors that play in there too. So if we go to importance in life, leisure time, and show, we can see, so here we've got Mexico, and was there anywhere else? Mexico is rating leisure time. The highest percentage is saying that leisure time is very important. Oh, and Sweden, sorry. So Mexico and Sweden are both up there with about 60% saying leisure time is very important. And then if we look to China, we've got the lowest percentage, about 1/5, saying that leisure time is very important. And then the rest of them are actually kind of like right in the, they're all actually very similar for the others. They're all between about 35, France is the lowest, and about 45%. So it's interesting too that the others line up. They're so similar. So what do you think? What's playing in here? So if you're explaining the cross-national data, what would you say? What would you think about it? Is there anything unexpected? Is it expected?
I'm surprised by France.
Okay, so maybe that it's lower compared to,
I would think it would be higher.
So like I would say cultural, I don't want to say necessarily stereotypes, but maybe that's the right word. I mean, at least the way we think of France in the US is very much like a high emphasis on leisure time, kind of maybe similarly to Spain that we don't have up here. And then maybe I wouldn't have known that Sweden would be, I wouldn't have thought that Sweden would be low, but maybe I would have thought it would look more like some other places like France or Germany or the UK. I wouldn't have maybe expected that would be that high. I don't think I would have known about Mexico. So,
Oh, I would have figured Mexico. They have you go to sleep, you take a breather.
Okay, well that's the other thing I was gonna say, is I was gonna say when I'm looking at this cross-national data, lots of times, I can't be a regional expert in all these areas, right, or a country expert, so that's why I'm constantly, you know, you may know this, if I see like a faculty member in history or political science, I'm always saying, oh, I've got this data and I'm trying to figure it out. What's going on here? And usually I can get a little bit of an idea of why we might be seeing what we're seeing. I wasn't gonna do any more, but because it's more relaxed now. Yeah. Maybe we could look at one other. So if we go just back to online analysis 2017 and survey. Can I go to my survey questions?
I think you got to select
my wave. Okay. Oh yeah, selected my wave, and then I've got to select my countries. I'm going to do just a few of them so I don't have to go through all of them. So let's just do like the US and the UK and whichever ones I can quickly remember. China and Canada and Australia and, I don't know if we noticed what happened with those Germany.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they just combined them because maybe in that wave it's combined, and so maybe you can only see them broken apart in earlier waves. I'm not sure about that. That'd be something good to look into. And France and Sweden. Where were you gonna say?
I was like, could we add a South America?
Add one. Yeah. What?
Let's just like, I don't know, like Brazil or something, just
Okay.
to kind of see. What
Yep.
It's a different continent.
Brazil.
Yeah.
And maybe we have nothing from the Middle East or North Africa, right? Is that true? We could add Morocco or, now see, I'm just picking randomly, which is what we tell the students
Just
not
like,
exactly
yeah,
to do,
just
right?
take away.
And so then if we go to the survey questions, what one do we want to look at? I mean, I said that I think the important child qualities are interesting. There's also importance in life friends, important in life families. We can go on and on. How do we feel about having neighbors that are heavy drinkers? How do we feel about having neighbors who are homosexuals? How do we feel about whether university is more important for a boy than a girl? It's too hard. There's too many to pick from. They're all interesting. These ones, a lot of these people will use as a group, right? So they kind of, you can think about the way you take a depression screening test or an anxiety screening test, and it wouldn't just be based on your answer to one question, like, do you ever have a time when you have trouble sleeping, or do you ever have a time when you're eating too much or too little? Instead, it would be your scores on a whole lot combined. So like, I've used these in research before, but so have other people. For the men make better political leaders, university is more important for a boy than a girl, men make better business executives. And then the job scarce one, and then you can combine them, and then you can get an idea of how different societies, for a broader view of women's rights in different countries. I don't know what to go with now, though.
Well, if you stick with the leisure time, could you add in the work, importance in life work?
Want to just look at, I'm not sure if I can look at both. Let's look at importance in life work. I think there is a way, I just might have to,
I'd be curious to see if they line up. Right?
you're right. So let's see what's happening now. Is it going to show it to me? Okay, so importance in life work. Oh, this is sort of interesting. Look how important it is in Iraq and Mexico, which also had a really high importance on leisure time. Yep, you're right, Morocco, and then look at United Kingdoms.
United Kingdom, that's about.
Wait, but China too? This is, I'm
Surprising.
yeah, I would have thought, like, again, that maybe since China had lower importance on leisure time, they would have had higher importance on work. So again,
I'm sorry, I was looking at the US.
at the US. That's right, and
We
we're
have low leisure and we don't care about work.
that's exactly right. That's right.
TikTok.
That is exactly right. So see, it's totally fascinating, and it's fun because anybody, you don't have any statistical skills or use a special program. You can just go in and play with it. And there's also a way, we wouldn't do this today, but you can cross it by, you can put in there something like gender, and then you can look at how important is work in Australia for men versus women, or how important is work in Australia for people of different racial or ethnic groups, something like that.
Can you also divide it up based on political party?
Yep, yeah. You can, in the World Values Survey, so again, it has to operate across all these countries, so it has a question left to right continuum, 1 is far left, 10 is far right, so you can do that.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
Can you compare different timeframes, different ways?
Yes, you can. So you can look at, like the different waves of data and see something like, I kept thinking someone should look at like attitudes towards women's work and things like that in Saudi Arabia, because there's been, under the Crown Prince, some big changes there, right? So,
For sure.
so I think that would be like an interesting one to look at. So you can do what they call time series, which is looking across waves. Okay, so everything feels a little dry.
So to make it, if you don't want to share anymore, go down to the window that you clicked before. Or you can just hit stop sharing, actually.
See that little blue button? No,
The bottom.
keep going.
Thank you. Okay, so now I can go back to my PowerPoint
And
and
then
then,
you're gonna have to go to share data.
okay. Thank you. So share, where files? Okay.
And then you scroll down.
Okay. There we go, and share now. Okay, so, we'll see how much of this I get through. We can stop and make sure we have time for conversation too. So, okay, so we did the online analysis, and then I was gonna talk a little bit about my own research. So one thing I've looked at is explaining confidence or trust in science, cross-nationally. And so, what I said is, when you look at this at first, it's another thing. First of all, the cross-national data, the statistics sounds dry, and then I also think compared to other things that sociologists study, because sociologists study such fun things, even just attitudes towards science, again, seems a little bit dry. So I try and, when I'm talking about it, when I'm giving a presentation or something, I say that if you follow the news or even just your Facebook feed, you'll see that science is no longer just the domain of, natural scientists, biologists, physicists, I don't know, chemists, but even not just the domain of, natural and social scientists. It's part of our public conversation now. And so things like the efficacy and the necessity of COVID-19 mitigation measures, the same with the vaccines, childhood vaccines, labeling of genetically modified foods, safety of genetically modified foods, global warming, of course, all of those have made the leap from issues discussed by, scientists and maybe scientific policy advisors to public issues, right? I say they're debated in face-to-face conversations, but where we really see them debated is online, right? So we see a lot of division. And then the other interesting thing is because they've become public issues, politicians in the past who could really avoid taking a political stance on scientific issues are now forced to weigh in on them. And so we even see things like politicians making, obviously making a big statement by getting or not getting their COVID vaccination, for example. And so, okay, so let me see. I'm sort of speeding this up a little bit to just get through a little of my research before we chat. So I said, looking across a sample of 47 countries, how will low-income, middle-income, and high-income countries differ in their trust in science? So if we divide countries up, they're going to have other differences, obviously. There's going to be different predominant religions, there's going to be different political regimes, but if we just look at income as one factor, how would they differ in their trust in science? And does anyone have any thoughts about that? Go ahead, Sarah.
My thoughts have changed since COVID. So
Okay.
I think that actually, when it comes to at least like vaccines,
Yeah.
I would say lower income has more trust than higher income.
Yep.
I've just seen so many examples of, low income communities, migrant communities, getting vaccinated, I think because they have more experience
Yeah.
with disease and illness. And then high income, maybe a little too much time on their hands. I don't know what the
Yeah.
reason is, but it just seems that they are looking for alternative sources
Yes.
and question the science.
Yep.
It's not what I would have expected if you'd asked me a few years ago.
Okay, so I think that plays into exactly what I was going to sort of talk about, but I think what's interesting is that you can see it even within, I think you're saying like even within the United States, not even looking cross-nationally, we can see those differences between different communities. And I think that's interesting because I would say that I agree with everything you just said, and I think that may be novel and new. Like when you're saying it, I'm thinking, yes, and it goes against what people have said for a long time, which is like the higher educated, those with a higher income, white people, sort of all the markers of advantage in our society would traditionally be associated with trust in science, but I think you're right, that's what we're seeing, right? It seems like it's a big change. When we look across countries, so I make this, I say like this is my hypothesis or my argument, and then we did find this to be true. People living in rich, educated, technologically connected, and healthy societies are actually less confident in science than their counterparts in developing countries. And so then we tried to sort of explain this, and we use something called, it's by the German sociologist Ulrich Beck, and then Anthony Giddens, a British sociologist, and they came up with this theory of risk society. And basically it's that idea that people in developed societies are hyper aware of rare but high consequence risks, especially those created by science, and then almost this expectation too that they're going to be able to manage the risk that they're exposed to on their own, and maybe that
It's almost like social paranoia.
yeah, it is.
It's just a very small sliver of a risk.
It really is. It really is. It's like even if that risk is tiny, people are basing their decision-making off it. So it's
Like their
So
life on it.
their life, exactly right. Yep, exactly. I know. Yep. And so I said so again, base this hypothesis on the fact that we know that those countries that have experienced the greatest scientific advances are also concerned about populaces that are increasingly distrustful of science. And I was writing this, some of this is a little bit old because I've been working on this for a while, but especially like say 2014, 2016, that's when we saw a lot of like attention in the New York Times and other places about this war on science and sort of what are we doing wrong if the populace doesn't trust science. And I said, we think that maybe it's because those in developed societies are aware of the highest consequences, risks to the environment and human life, things like global pandemics, weapons of mass destruction, in the control of, rogue entities or non-state entities, are real dangers. And then also, while things like cellular and internet technology have made life easier, they've also demonstrated how easy it is to track information on us, right? Collect billions and billions of bits of data. And then things like election interference, right? How easy it is for people here or in other countries to manipulate where we're getting our information from. Let's see, so maybe risk society. So this idea of individuals in developed countries being very aware of the high consequence risks is what we call that risk society thesis. And the idea is with our material needs met, we now become really focused on risk to our safety, our families, our communities, and as well as future generations, right? So that's another thing. We've got this relative level of security. And so we're also, some of this you can almost see as a positive. We are also at a point where we have the luxury to say, what's the environmental situation going to look like for, our great-great-grandkids, right? So some of it is being able to be more forward-thinking, or I don't want to say forward-thinking, more future-oriented once your basic needs are met. Okay, let me see. And then so we'll just look at, this is the confidence in science across different country income classifications. So we can see, did I show the 3 questions? So the 3 questions asked are the level of agreement on a 1 to 10 point scale. 10, you completely agree. 1, you completely disagree. And then 3 questions. Science and technology are making our lives healthier, easier, and more comfortable. Then the second one, because of science and technology, there'll be more opportunities for the next generation. And then the world is better off or worse off because of science and technology. And so we can see overall, like the means are fairly high, like most people were about 7, the average was 7 for all of 7.8, 7.6 for all of these items. But there's also, some variation across countries. And the first thing we just looked at was grouping it by income level of the countries using the World Bank definitions of just high income, middle income, low income. And so then right away, you can see that really interesting relationship where you'd think the people that have had the most sort of gain from science might be the most confident in it, but we don't see that. So I think I'll stop there, and then maybe we can have a chance to chat a little bit.
So we do have something on the chat section.
Oh,
Okay. All right, well, if you're online and you have questions, please type them into the chat box. Otherwise, I'm just going to open it up for whoever wants to talk.
I have kind of an open-ended question.
Yeah.
So you started this research before COVID.
Yes.
So I think I know the answer, but can you talk a bit about how perhaps your research blew up in 2020, or like what changed for you?
Like one thing, what was it? I actually sent a paper out for review, and I had started it before COVID and not fixed everything, not, go through and try and update all the, front-end literature review and discussion. And one thing we said was something like, well, in what we were talking about is sort of how with risk society theory, a big part of it is that it forces us to not be isolated countries anymore. So I think that's also a lot of what, there's a book by Anthony Giddens, and it's called Runaway World. And it talks, a lot of what it talks about is how globalization means that, and it's not just globalization, it's how interconnected our societies are. You think of the travel between countries, so it's not just internet connectivity, but travel of actual people. And so we can't any longer say, we're gonna focus on risks in the United States, and we don't care about this pandemic that's happening in China, right? As soon as we hear something like that, it's now, we know the consequences for this kind of thing. But I think what I said in that is something like countries with, so we're all susceptible to these risks, but high income countries have more resources that they can kind of mitigate them. And I used global pandemics as an example and said something like, they're able to quickly get them under control. And so the reviewer was like, considering, we're like 4 years into, or almost 4 years into the COVID pandemic now, it was just a comment on update this. Honestly, I haven't, like, everything moves so fast, I haven't been as much attitudes towards COVID vaccines. So the undergrad just did a Qualtrics survey, so it was looking at individual level, and then the graduate student looked at all Georgia counties and how, they said that they were not coming because they were exposed to COVID. Well, thank you for joining us online.
Whoever you are, yes, thank you.
And so, where was I going with that? Oh yeah, all Georgia counties, and that was predominant, which party they went for. And
See, that's the part that always interests me.
yes, and so it was completely, it was the strongest predictor that counties that went for Trump in the last political election had way lower COVID vaccine rates than counties that went for Biden. So that's, so it was sort of interesting that after he controlled for a number of different things, income of the county, racial makeup of the county, what else? Average education level, all these factors that you think would be important, and some of them were important, and they would sort of decrease, like all of them explain part of the variation of what was going on, but the most important was political party. So it's become, it just seems like the politicization has just increased even more, right?
That's really interesting. I had thoughts as you were going, but I didn't want to interrupt you. One early on, before you started talking about your research, we were talking about the outsourcing.
Yes.
I don't need to sound like a venture capitalist.
Yeah.
I really think sociologists can create some sort of platform that would make millions of dollars. The amount of data that you guys get, behavior, what people do, how they think. What am I saying? We.
Yeah.
And I just don't know how come we don't have our own little TikTok.
That's a good question.
Leave education altogether. Use your education to become a multi-billion.
I know.
That's how I try to convince people to become
Well,
makers.
sometimes when I tell the students all the things that you can do with, like when we start in research methods, I'll say, okay, so we're going to look at something like how does gender and age relate to likelihood that you voted in the last election or something, right? Just to start looking at some simple relationships. And then sometimes I'll say, but if you're in marketing research, it could be how does gender and age influence the likelihood that you shopped at Target in the last month, right? So the same stuff, take those skills and they're totally transferable to some place where it may be more lucrative. So it's true.
Yeah, if you're still on there, major in social, minor in marketing.
That's exactly right.
That's
Yeah,
the way it should be.
that's right. Yeah.
Sociology for the dark side.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly.
Do you find that folks discount this type of research? This is something that I typically get confronted on, sociology is a soft science.
Yeah.
So the level of maybe confidence that folks have when you present that research, it's always, it's a wishy-washy, they're like,
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
how do you respond to that?
A couple different things. First of all, there's just that divide that I sort of talked about where qualitative versus quantitative, and I do quantitative mostly, though we're doing a little bit of qualitative with Shelley. But I would say, I feel like, I wouldn't present it as any kind of hierarchy there, and I think that's, one question is when you read a question like this, one that's your key, your key dependent variable. Will the world be better off or worse off because of science? There's no one there to phrase, here's what I mean by science, here's what I mean by better off or worse off. So you always have to worry that different people are reading that question in completely different ways. So someone's just answering it completely. I mean, think about someone who would be answering it in terms of environmentalism, or maybe they're thinking about,
This is the kind of research that sociologists do is so fun and it's so interesting that I find it surprising that more students aren't eager to want to participate in that.
Yeah.
Because these types of studies lead to why things are prevention,
why
right?
things are happening.
Like when preventative care,
Yeah.
for example, like in the mental health field.
Yeah.
If we don't have data to kind of help us understand what communities are being impacted, then by the time they're in crisis, it's too late, right? We're trying to clean up the mess.
That's
So
right.
I think like if there's a way to
So what
get
is
into
it?
high schools, get into middle schools,
I know.
like get those little fun classes in there,
Yeah.
you know?
Because I think that part of what you're getting at is just, the way I had to begin it with what is sociology, right?
Exactly.
And you never begin it with what is history,
History,
right? Or even what is
Well, I know
political
you-
science.
What is it? I know you have to.
Anthropology, maybe a little bit, but I still even feel like
You could show an Indiana Jones clip if it
They
was.
probably think they're archaeology.
They probably
That's
do
what
archaeology, that's right.
Yeah.
Cultural anthropology is
Yeah.
something probably entirely different, but it is, I think that's, and then,
That just aggravates me because I get it a lot, you
Yeah.
know, they're
What,
like,
sociology?
yeah, they'll say, oh, psychology, I'm like.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and even at the grad level, am I applying to the Master's in Social Work program? No, two separate ones. If you want to apply to the Master's in Social Work, Master's in Sociology, here, let's figure it out together, which one would be more
Yeah,
ideal for you.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, there just needs to be more marketing and kind of showing how fun this is, because I think it becomes intimidating when they see the statistics, we talked about this.
Yes, that's right.
You know, students see that, oh my God, I'm not good at math. Well, you don't have to be good at math. to be
No,
a good
yeah,
sociologist.
go on and
Just
you could write a whole
compare and
paper
contrast.
using the online analysis
Yeah.
tool, technically. You
Right.
could write a whole paper just sort of looking at the differences in different countries just with what's available
This is neat.
out there.
This is neat.
Oh, well, thank you.
I love it. I didn't know you were
participating.
working on this. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Can I add in a comment
Uh-huh.
for you, just, I think something you were expressing there as well,
Yeah.
something I tell my students, is that triangulation is so important, right? So-
Yes.
So what you're doing, especially if it's just, the quantitative stuff, bringing in a qualitative element
Yes.
to that and saying, okay, just like you said, we see these
Yeah.
trends, but what do they mean? So then
Yeah.
that's when we pack our bags and we go, and start, interviewing people,
Yeah.
talking to people, doing observations.
Yeah, that's so much, that information, when you do an interview with somebody, that is so rich.
It really is.
It's so, to me, now don't get me wrong, I like the demographics stuff
Yeah.
from the surveys, I love that, but I love that, the tone, the facial expressions, the body
Uh-huh.
language, how
Yeah.
the setting and structure is impacting how that individual is comfortable or uncomfortable. Those are things that you can just write down. You don't get that. If I were to, like, for example, if I were to make the room hot,
Yeah.
how is that gonna impact? Is it gonna make the interview shorter? Probably.
Yeah.
Those are things that you can write down that you can't get from survey.
When you do interview research too, you're so much more likely to figure out, I think, that this is the more interesting direction that I need to be going, and then to completely change your sort of research trajectory, which I think is way less likely to happen when you're working with this. Sometimes it happens a little bit, but to give one example, when I was in, we had one qualitative methods class in graduate school, and there was a big, in Columbus, Ohio, there was a big population of Somali refugees resettled there. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna go through the IRP process, and I want to do something. I would love to interview some of them about their experiences. And it was just for a class, so it was just going to be sort of exploratory, just sort of what things have been challenging and what things have been unexpected. When I did just a few interviews, what was so interesting that came up was, like, I'm doing these interviews and the several of the Somali immigrants, what they wanted to tell me was how they were different than African Americans. So like it would be something like it would just come up, it was sort of really tangential, like how did this even relate to the question? But suddenly they're telling me like, yeah, it's interesting. Our face, like my facial structure looks like this, and you can see like the combination of Middle Eastern features and African features, and then like my hair. And I was like, why is this going on and why is it coming up so much? And I basically saw it as they're quickly looking at the racial hierarchy of the United States and they're saying, why would I want to assimilate into a group that is not like it doesn't have a high status in our society? So I'm gonna quickly like point out to you all the ways that I'm. So so that's why qualitative research is so cool.
I mean, there's so much, because then you also have to take into account the interviewer's identity. If you were
Yes.
African American, would they be answering?
Would they?
that?
Yeah, they probably not, right? Or maybe who knows?
Or they
but
may
yeah.
still do, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So, AJ, since we have a few more minutes, will you tell us a little bit about your research, since you are doing some qualitative research?
I think I'm gonna talk about, right? I'm doing real. That's next one.
Oh, I shouldn't let you give too much away. Let's wait.
No, that's okay. That we don't.
Okay. No.
No, it is gonna get us to come, you're gonna give us a preview.
Yeah, that's
5
right.
minutes.
So, okay, I can
5
do it
minute
in three, I can
preview.
do it in three. So, me and Nancy Malcolm at Georgia Southern are working on a study. We're actually getting to phase 2 of it. We're doing this thing on the Methodist Church. It's almost all qualitative. We did send out surveys with Qualtrics, but that was just to get interviewees in.
Yeah.
But trying to kind of understand that the Methodist Church recently went through this divorce. That's just a little word I know, from inclusivity of LGBTQ clergy and being able to marry LGBTQ individuals, and those who just wanted what they're calling traditional marriage, right, the heterosexual stuff. So we were curious. We know why people were leaving the church, but we wanted to know why people were staying.
Yeah.
And we started to research, kind of like you with COVID. We started research before the divorce. So we were doing it while it was all still United Methodist Church, and we were getting like gays and bis and trans folks were still staying in this very hostile religious environment, and we were like, why?
Yeah.
Like, why? I left mine because I just couldn't do it anymore. Right?
Yeah.
I was like, why? And so we started asking these questions, and then literally right smack in the middle of interviewing in March, we got the word that they were going to divorce as of May 1st, and we were right in the middle of interviews. So then we started getting different responses, and we had to kind of, I know you have to keep your questions, but you kind of can, you can kind of alter them.
Of course.
And so, we're still in the middle of it, but
That's so interesting. Well, that's what I want to hear. Why are they staying?
All of my interviews have been through Google Meets, but it just listening to these people, like, it's just amazing, like their passion, and I just want to cry with them. Like some of them just break out, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm gonna cry.
Making my guesses, AJ, is it sort of like when we see other times where people's identity is like, one part of their identity is way more salient or keeping them, like, the examples are like racial minorities who vote Republican, so it would be is it
women?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, you know what I mean? So I'm wondering, I guess I could think of different explanations. Maybe you feel like the church as a whole does this, but this is my own congregation and I know that it's friends and family. They support me.
Yeah.
So they know me as an individual. Okay, is that part of it?
You've hit a thing. Cradle Methodist. I've always been there. I know
Okay.
people, my granddaddies, that brothers, children, So that's one thing, but I'll share the rest of it.
Okay, we'll do the next time.
Okay, so we're gonna call it quits for today. We hope that you guys come back and enjoy us and that we get more people as we go. All these are recorded, so you can go to our website and watch past brown bags. This one will be up hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So watch your emails and your, I guess we're on Instagram now too. So check out our times and we will see you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anne, this was
Oh,
excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you for
You got
coming.
the prize.
This was very fun.
maybe I shouldn't admit this, but I was a sociology major.